Elemental interviews on my channel, John Kingdom Saga. And this evening, first of all, greetings. Happy afternoon, morning, evening, night, wherever you are. This evening for me, 7 p.m., I have an absolutely fabulous guest, fellow Canuck, fellow Canadian, an author whose work I absolutely adored. This is one of my, definitely, I figure, I know it's early, I'm shot calling, it's like April, but this is going to be, I predict that this, one of the books in the series is going to be my top 10 indie science fiction fantasy books of the year, because these are phenomenal. And with me tonight, I have the author himself. He's getting a lot of buzz in indie circles in our corner right now. So, and there's reason for that. So I want to have him on, and maybe you can understand what all the hype's about. So welcome, Zammar and Amir.
Thank you so much, PL. I feel like this chat is a little bit overdue, because there's been the longest time where I'm like, I just want to chat with PL. And you live, like, we were just talking about this before we went online, but you live like maybe 2 hours, 3 hours north of where I am. And I always see like you're always doing in-person events for book sales. And I was always thinking, like, one of these days I'm just going to make it there, and I'm going to show up at his table and be like, hey man, I want to buy your books. I want them all signed. Because like one thing which people should know is, like, I am a huge fan of PL's work. I just finished book 3, Lord and King, and I thought it was just absolutely phenomenal. So, him and I have been chatting a bit, and it's just getting his input as a fellow author, and then the fact that he read my books is just like such an absolute honor. So if you don't know, I wrote this duology, Riven Earth and Sundered Moon. So start with this one, Riven Earth. I think my screen's a bit dark, but if you Google it, you'll see it's a pretty neat cover. So that's a pretty complete story, and then there's like a bonus novella which has dinosaurs on it, which is pretty cool. So
yeah, that is fantastic. Yeah, and you can see them up on the screen as well, at least Riven Earth and Sundered Moon. I'm going to quickly just say we have a wonderful guest in the audience already. It's Chipopo. Thanks so much, Chipopo, for coming by. Amazing support of the channel, friend of the community, supporting all authors. I am actually going to have the honor. I want to do something different as this Six Elementals and everything evolves. Chipopo is such an amazing member of the community, someone who always gives back selflessly. And so I'm actually going to get to interview him as a community, support interview because he, so many authors, we owe so much to people like Chipopo who support us and boost our books, etc., and comment and join these lives. So I'm going to get to chat to him later on this summer. So thanks again, my friend, for coming by. He says he's going to have a matcha tea with milk, and settle in. We're gonna hear about a great author and his work. So, wow. Okay, so Zammar, like this duology is fire. So, before we get into the actual story, you're right. And the characters, especially, want to dive into, because the characters are phenomenal. How did this all come about?
Yeah, that's a great question. And like one of the interesting things, I think, PL, is when you and I chat, I always can't help thinking that we are just opposites in so many different ways, especially as authors, because I know that you are like the master planner, like even this chat, you were messaging me back in January, you wanted to schedule something. I don't think you'd even read my books at that point, but and then I was like, this guy is so ahead of it. I wish I was that organized. Like I am a very chaotic person. So then when it comes to writing, I'm kind of like that as well. I guess it's been a while now. I think back in 2022, maybe, or was it 2023? I kind of had the kernel of inspiration for this story. I was just sometimes I just like reading history. So I was reading history. I might have been listening to a podcast, I don't remember, but it was about this Indian king called Ashoka the Great. And Ashoka, you might have heard of him. I'm not sure if you have, but he was a king, and like there's a whole story. Like obviously, it's ancient history. This is like around the time of Alexander, so we don't know what actually happened, but you can enjoy the story about him, right? So the story about him is like he conquered a bunch of people, and then after he saw like just the bloodshed and how bad everything was from all of his conquering, he really felt bad about it, and he felt like it felt like he needed to repent for what had happened. And Ashoka is also the king who essentially spread Buddhism across the Indian peninsula. So that was kind of this kernel of the story, was just this idea of a king who's, like, feels a lot of regret. And what kind of happened with me with these books is these were my debut books. I mean, I've been reading for a long time. I did write a book beforehand, but I just kind of kept it to myself. It was like a trunk novel, you could call it. And it wasn't fantasy. It was, I guess, close to lit fic. I don't know what that was, but it wasn't very good. I'll say that. But anyway, with this novel, I kind of start with that kernel of an idea, and then that somehow just evolves into scenes which are very vivid in my mind. And it's like a certain set of scenes with these specific characters. And once I have this scene, it's like, okay, this scene is like, there's like a crazy battlefield, and there's like a king there, and he's like weeping in front of the battlefield, like whatever, you might recognize that scene or whatever. But I kind of start from that scene, and it's like, how do I get there? Like, what is this guy's story? What, who are these people around him? Like, what happened here that caused him to feel like this? And essentially, it's just a lot of daydreaming, man. Like, when I'm at work and I should be like paying attention in meetings, I'm actually off daydreaming about this story. And I've mentioned this before, but to me, it's always felt like writing to me was the most immersive form of storytelling which I've ever experienced. Like, instead of, like, it's like when you're reading a book and you're really in the world and you're experiencing it like that, writing like takes that up to the next level, right? Like, you're really in there, you're really in the characters' heads, and like you fully understand what's going on. And so that's more or less what it was. It was like, it was almost an obsession. Like, I have to get this down. And over time, the story just started developing more. Like, this is why I'm not a planner like you are, PL. But like, for me, I just don't have the patience to plan. I just had to like get in there. I need to live in this world right now. I need to like figure out what's happening. And once I'm in the world, I'm like, oh, I actually don't know what the world is. I'm building the plane as I'm flying it, and like that's more or less my methodology. But yeah, I mean, that's what happened. Like, I just started writing, and then all of a sudden I went with wherever the story took me. And I think that's more or less how it came about.
Wow, that is incredible. And we talked about this, that it doesn't matter how you write a book. And we're all individuals. We all have our unique thought process, our unique methodologies, as you said. And who cares if you're a planner or a plotter, as long as you write the book and it works. And your book was fantastic. So clearly, it was very extremely polished. So clearly, once you got into writing the book, and also, sorry, I should also say it's extremely cinematic. And I love that aspect about your work. Like, those scenes that you talked about in your head, whether it was a compelling character moment or a battle or, political intrigue, they were all so, I could literally see them in my head. So you definitely write cinematically. And I think that's a credit to your skill, right? Because I think we all want books that can transport us somewhere else. And your world building was also phenomenal. So I think, however you did it, to someone on the outside looking in like me, it may seem chaotic, but the end result is this, which was very fluid, very polished, was just awesome. So it doesn't matter how you got there, brother, and it's incredible. So kudos to you.
Yeah, I think my methodology would be tricky for a very long series. So like what you're doing with like a 7-book series, I feel like you really need to start planning things out from the start, and like setting up the world appropriately so that you can plan across 7 books. But I kind of got away with it because I wrote a duology as well. But also like you said, it is just a different methodology, and ultimately it's a matter of editing, right? Like, I just probably end up having a less polished first draft that I need to go back and like fix a whole bunch of things in. Like, I did not know or understand my world at the end of my first draft, but then the first draft to me is like telling myself the story, right? And then once I've told myself the story, I'm like, oh, so that's what's going on here. That's what like that's how this magic works. And like, that's actually what this character's journey meant. Okay, now I could go back and be like, all that stuff which I had before is kind of like almost there, but not quite. Like, let's make it all line up correctly. So editing is a royal pain, but I love doing the first draft. Like, for me, it's just like, I'm just living in a story,
Well, that's where there's some commonality, I think. I think, and I may be wrong, between people who more don't plan their plots and their story surgery and people who do, because it's the same for me. Like that first draft, it's for me, right? And I'm not worried about grammar, spelling, punctuation, continuity, anything. I'm just writing for me. And then after that first draft, then I go back, okay, well, I need to line this up with this and this up with that. And then I start to evolve. Like if there's a certain battle scene, I don't quite see it in my head in terms of logistics. And even though I planned it out previously, something's not right, then I'll go back and I'll address that, right? But I think there's a lot of commonalities there with that first draft, certainly. But I mean, again, as I said, at the end result, man, it's freaking fantastic. The story was, but I have to ask though. So, in saying that per se, you're not a planner per se. Was it always planned to be a duology, or did you plan for a trilogy, something longer, or a standalone? What did you plan this to be?
Yeah, I mean that is a great question, and the funny thing is you're using the word plan in there.
I can't help it. I'm sorry. I apologize, man.
No. Like it's a perfectly rational question, and it makes a lot of sense. But to be honest, I did not think about it. I actually thought, to be honest, I'm going to write a standalone book because I was just watching a lot of BookTube, and everyone on BookTube is like, authors need to write more standalones. Like the industry promotes series, we need more standalones. And I was like, there's a need. I'm going to be the guy who writes a standalone. Also, because I'm too dumb to write a series, I'm going to write a standalone. So then I went to write a standalone, and as I was writing it, I'm like, there's more to this story. There's more to this world. There's these other characters that like are kind of speaking for me, and I kind of want this perspective and all this stuff. The story started sprawling, and like that's one of the risks if you're a pantser, I guess, is you can let it get out of hand. So I tried my best to control that, but I also felt like if I'm going to do justice to the core of my story, then I need to like give it room to breathe. And essentially, like it just ended up being long, like almost 300,000 words. I'm like, you could publish a 300,000 word standalone, but at the same time, as a debut novel, first of all, that's not the best idea because like no one's going to read that anyway. And secondly, it felt like the story had to, like, even though it is the Book of Astea, that's why I call it the Book of Astea, because it really is in my mind like one coherent story. Like it really is intended to be read back to back. It still felt like there were two distinct arcs. So like the first book is really like the story of this one king, and then the second book, like you have a little bit more expansion of the world and the characters around him. So sorry, I'm a little bit stuffy. I've been sick recently. So then anyway, at that point, I started realizing that actually there are two distinct arcs. I can like rearrange things, and then there's advantages too, because like a lot of people can just read book one and be like, they can drop off after that, and they're like, I don't like this guy that much, I'm just gonna drop it, or they can take a break or whatever. So yeah, I mean that was essentially it. But I did want to write everything and then publish it all at once. So that's why like the two books came out within a month, I think, or so, just to because I didn't want to keep people waiting, I guess.
Well, I think it worked well. I think it was a great idea. I think it was a smart business decision to have the books, back, like, and when it comes to duologies, it's funny. Like some of my favorite series into the fantasy sphere are duologies. So Tessa Gratton's, she's got the Innislear duology. That's on the traditionally published side. When I think about Jay Hannaford, who's currently a self-published fantasy blog off finalist in the current SBFBO 10. Her Black Hind's Wake duology, the Skin in the Pack, one of my faves. Gates of Hope. She writes duologies, and I think there's room for everything, man. And I think duologies are awesome in terms of you don't have to invest in a super long series like mine, and especially if you like the first book, you get to the second book and you can put another series notch on your TBR. So I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is like after I thought about it more, it's like actually duologies are really cool. Like I think the duology structure works really well. In like trilogy is like the standard, but a lot of the time it's like the middle book syndrome. Was the middle book kind of necessary? Did it kind of drag the story down? With the duology, you could keep things really tight, I think. And the other thing is like you could get on top of people's lists more easily. You know, they're like my favorite fantasy duologies.
Like I said, man, smart. You may not have planned this out, but a lot of wise decisions there, my friend. So,
Yeah.
I'm quickly going to shout out another awesome supporter of many channels in this space. James, the Mini Answer. James, what's up? Thanks so much for coming by. He says, "Greetings, all. Cannot wait to read your book, Zammar." So he's excited. He includes in that Sojourn in the Sunset Forest, which I have to get to, which sounds absolutely amazing, which will satisfy my huge craving for more of your story. So, so now I want to get into a bit before, and I can't wait to get to the actual nitty gritty of the work. But okay, so this book, you write story. What about the publishing aspect? Did you think about going the traditional publishing route or something different? Did you always believe you're going to self-publish? So you write the book. So are you thinking now what's going to happen when I finish? Are you thinking I'm going to go through this route, or how did that all go down?
Yeah. So the thing is, I don't think I thought about publishing until I was like halfway through the first book, or halfway through the book even, because I don't know, it just never occurred to me. I just wanted to write the story, and I was like, maybe I'll share it with my friends, and someone might read it. So I was just trying to get the story on paper. But then once I started thinking about publishing, through all the booktube I'd watched, it was I had this understanding that going traditional, I mean, apart from being just hard to qualify and stuff for trad, it's also a loss of control, and like you end up working with other people's timelines. So I think I read this stat where like you might end up waiting for like several months to up to a year from when your book is like fully submitted to before it gets released. And I was like, I ain't got time for that. Like if I'm gonna put this book out there, I'm just gonna do it on my terms and just throw it out there. And like I really didn't want too much meddling. And like of course I got my books edited and everything, right? But I didn't want too many voices changing things, I guess. Like I wanted to keep it as authentic to the story that I could get in my head. And yeah, so like to be honest, I didn't even consider going trad. So it was just like, yeah, I mean, self-pub just seemed like the thing to do.
That's awesome. And you know what? Again, shared thought process there, in that I started publishing when as a graybeard, so I figured I gotta get this thing started. I don't have time to wait to do the whole querying agent book deal thing, so it's want to get it out, and I haven't looked back, and I haven't regretted it. Are you happy in hindsight about the decision? Are you pleased that you went that route?
I mean, the books have done way better than I ever would have expected them to be honest. Like I was like, maybe if like 10 people read this, I'll be happy. But like the sales, like everything, it's completely blown me away. So I'm really happy. Just because the other part of it is I feel like I've got to know this particular community really well. Like got to just mesh in with all the indie authors on Twitter and on BookTube and stuff. And it's such a supportive, friendly community. And I mean, like that alone makes me kind of feel like really no regrets. Like maybe the next book I write, like I could consider going for trad pub, but with these guys, like I'm really happy with the way things have gone on.
Yeah, it's amazing, when you actually do it, and you do it without. And again, I support all authors regardless of irrespective of how they're published. But I'm a big fan of indie. I'm an indie author myself. I feel like the creative freedom, as you talked about, is just incredible. I feel that the ability to simply push that button is incredible. And of course we get our books professionally edited and beta readers and cover design, all these things. But I just think that the industry's changing, and I mean, we would be deprived of reading these awesome books right away had you gone that route potentially, right? And they might not read the way they do now, because a traditional publisher might very much want change, not because they're not phenomenal, but because that's what they do. They want things to be written to market, right? So, yeah. But so you publish it, and then again, this is in my small corner of the indie space, this is definitely one of the most talked about debuts, or this is the debut story. This is the debut over here, but the second book as well. So you said you're overwhelmed by the response, overwhelmed by the sales. Were you surprised because you weren't sure if you would reach the audience to get the sales, or were you surprised by the critical claim of top reviewers like Esme Rosaline, who loves absolutely love your books? There's a lot of reviewers out there that love your books and they're putting them on top indie lists. I love your book. You both of them. What was the real surprise in what's happened so far?
I mean, like literally everything, man. Like I was surprised. Like I had no idea how to get the word out there for sure. So I think the most helpful thing, of course, was just having really cool covers. I think, like finding a great artist in Andrew Molesky, and that's one thing I kind of understood from the start, where like I always had a dream of holding my own book, and I wanted to make sure that it's got like a really cool cover, but I also understood from a marketing perspective that like the cover is basically everything. But I think once that art really helps pick up that initial steam, and then people like Esme are just absolute heroes in indie, because like someone like her who read so many books, and then if they're able to give your book a chance and it happens to click with them. And I mean, Esme is a really, really good friend of mine, but there's a lot of people who are just doing that and giving, and they're basically like the heroes who dig through all the indie books and find like gems. So yeah, like I feel like I kind of got lucky, to be honest. Like, just kind of fell into the right hands and happened to click with the right few reviewers, and word got around. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if I published it again today, if it would end up the same way, but yeah, I don't know.
Well, you're being very modest. Talent is something that tends to rise to the surface, I believe. And while not all amazing books and authors get the spotlight shown on them that they deserve, you certainly deserve the spotlight that's getting shown on you, I believe, Zammar. Now I really want to get into talking about, like, I'm bursting to talk about. I've gotten the privilege of getting to talk to you, on DMs and stuff about your work and how much I love it and delving into character stuff. But for our audience, so first of all, just hearing from the author, can you tell us just an overview, not spoiler overview? What is this series about? What's Book of Astea about? What are you writing about here?
Yeah, so I have to try and remember what happened in these books. Yeah, you know how this is, right? Like you wrote A Drowned Kingdom some time ago. So now, do you ever get that feeling when you're sitting there? It's like, what exactly happened in that book again?
Yeah, you know what? Although I feel I know it, when I actually have to talk about it, sometimes I'm like, oh, but I forgot about this and I forgot about this, and I wrote the damn thing. So yeah,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so essentially what these books are about is it's an alternate universe. So there's a different world, and this world is basically it stopped turning. So on this planet, which is not turning, you have one side which is facing the sun, and it's like a really hot sun, and that side, like, no one can live there. It's too hot, like you'll just die. And then the other side is just because it's always night, it's very, very cold. So it's too cold, no one can live there, you'll just die. So then there's a strip of land in between, and it's very creatively called the Sunset Forest, which is where everyone lives, right? That's like the habitable area on this planet. And in that strip of land, essentially, it used to be like a pretty lush forest, and there were these dryads. So one of the nice things about these books is that there are pictures in them. So there were these dryads. So these guys here, and the dryads they essentially had something of an empire, and mankind was kind of subservient to them. So human beings were almost like dryad slaves in a way. And they were very oppressed, and they were kept oppressed through religion. Like you have to worship the Earth Mother Astea, and whatever you do, you can't disrespect that. But what happened was one guy, he kind of escaped those shackles and whatever, and he went into that burned part of the world, which is the desert, and he found the ruins of this old civilization. And in those ruins, he found the secret of fire, because the dryads had kept this secret really strong. Like they had different technologies in place of fire in this world, but they didn't have fire because fire tends to kill dryads and plants and stuff. So anyway, this guy found the secret of fire. he brought it back and he led the rebellion, which basically overthrew these dryads. So then our story really starts 12 years late after that. And it's about a young kingdom, a very young kingdom that's trying to establish itself. And they start seeing a lot of problems around the world. Like they've overthrown these dryads, they've gone against the Earth Mother, they've kind of abandoned their old religion and stuff like that. They see problems around the world. There's earthquakes happening, there's, like plague and stuff like that. And we follow, I mentioned a king before, so we follow a young king who's trying to like lead this young country, and they're trying to establish themselves, and maybe the way they're doing it is maybe not the smartest way. They're really growing very fast through the exploitation of the environment, which is one of the major themes in my books. Is like I was really wanting to get deep into the environmental theme of like how we exploit our environment and some of the consequences of that, and why we end up feeling that way. Because it's not like we're necessarily evil. We're just trying to build homes for our kids, but we don't have very good foresight, as it turns out. So yeah, essentially that's where the story goes. And yeah, I don't want to give away too much, but I hope that set something up pretty well.
No, that's a fantastic pitch and explanation of like overview of your books. I think it was so well done. Now, one of the things I loved about the book is that so this the king who makes this discovery. A lot of his, almost all of his, other than the characters talking about him, what happens to him is learned through his writings that he's made and left. Well, it was a very interesting decision. What made you choose to use that to convey his story and the backstory, essentially, of the entire narrative?
Yeah, so that king, Isaiah is his name. So I mean, look, his writings, basically what happened with him is that he wrote a journal called Reflections, and that journal was co-opted by people with motivations who took that journal and sort of put it out there. And so now there are what's it called, epigraphs? I don't know, like the little pieces of text at the start of a chapter. So there's a bunch of those throughout the book from straight from his journal. And Isaiah is very much directly inspired by Marcus Aurelius. I mean, it's reflections, meditations, like it's very, very, very obvious. And the funny thing is, I haven't even read Meditations. Although I haven't read all of it. Nor do I consider myself a Stoic, but I just loved this visual image of this this king who's got all these kingly burdens, and he's like a generally decent guy, right? And like every night he's like sitting down in his journal giving himself a pep talk. He's like, you gotta be strong, you gotta like be stoic or whatever. And so that's kind of like the inspiration for Isaiah came from that. And I was like, wouldn't it be cool if he was like that? Because he is very much a stoic kind of king. And so one of the reasons for that is because it's a direct contrast to his son, who is a new king. And so there's this big thematic element of how the old king's shadow just kind of constantly falls over his son, and how like that just follows him throughout. Because Isaiah's like a legend, like he's worshipped in this world, right? But then the new king has to like try and live up to that, and it just kind of adds to his woes. So
and that's
to his character.
And that was so well done. I just want to put a quick shout out from another amazing community supporter, a fantastic reviewer, Shane Boyce. How you doing, man? Thanks so much for coming by to support Zammar and the channel. Shane writes fabulous reviews. If you want a succinct, really well done review with great graphics and stuff, like Shane's your guy. So and he says he loved Riven Earth. I'll be reading Sundered Moon very soon. You're gonna love Sundered Moon, Shane. It is awesome. So thanks so much for coming by, my friend. Really appreciate it. I want to pull a bit on that thread of stoicism as we get into the characters. So because it's funny, although not his progeny, one of the three main characters, in the series, one of them kind of embodies stoicism, or at least she tries to, in her approach to basically being like a regent type in the kingdom, right? And it was such a fascinating character. So was that an element of was the stoic aspect, was that an element you wanted to make sure that Rhea is someone who she's barely keeping herself together, but she's keeping a kingdom together. Is that something you wanted to translate into her character?
Yeah, 100%. Like when I was writing the characters, to be honest, the characters kind of came to me pretty naturally. I Once I started writing, I felt like a sense of voice for Raya and for Kaido. Like Raya's voice kind of came to me at the end of the prologue, right off the bat. There's like this scene where she's pretty harsh, I guess
Yeah,
you could say.
yeah, yeah.
And it was like, yeah, okay. Now I kind of started to get a gist of who she is. But for me, it's like once I start writing from each character's perspective, then I spend some time in their heads, and then I can develop like a character arc kind of that feels natural for them based off of that. But yeah, like for Raya, again, a big part of it is like contrast to the King Kaido, right? And it's like she embodies his father's values, and then like for him, it's like something which he feels a lot of shame about too, right? It's like she's running the kingdom while I'm being pretty useless. But I don't know how into spoilers we want to get here, but yeah,
We'll try to keep it. I think we're not. I don't think we're going too deep, but I mean, we want to keep it somewhat spoiler free for those who remember the book. I think, but yeah, no, that's you're doing such a great job of that. Yeah, and I think expanding on this, on those two characters, then you have Chaz, and it's interesting the triumvirate, like this relationship of three, and the interactions and the push and pull and the complexities, because it's fraught with all of this tension underneath. There's unexpressed wishes and desires. There's all kinds of things going on there, but yet they're still in some ways close, but yet fragmented as a unit. So I found that dynamic utterly fascinating. What made you write that trio of characters and the interplay between their very complicated relationship?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you consider it well done, because really, like those three, like their relationship is kind of the heart of the story, and it's the way that they feel about each other, their sense of royalty. Like these are characters who have been friends since childhood, right? So it's these three people who care deeply for each other, but at the same time, when you have relationships that long, there's always some degree of baggage that comes with it, and there's some degree of like personal tensions and stuff like that, which has to kind of come into play. So for me, like writing this book, I had to understand, like, okay, I understand that they care for each other deeply and that they were friends for a long time, but then like where are we at this moment, right? Like what are the particular tensions at this moment, and like how can I capture that while also capturing their general feelings towards one another, and their sense of royalty, which was maybe one of the more challenging things to do writing it.
Well, I think again, spectacular job. One thing that really came through with those three characters there is in terms of their they all characters, while at the essentially the upper echelon of the society, in some ways they were very much in a way misfits and not fitting in where normally you think that they would fit in. That was also something that I really thought was so well done, in that they were struggling with their role, they were struggling with their sense of identity. They're all struggling, although you would think that these who have everything, like again, they're at the pinnacle of their society, but they're all struggling in a way to fit in. And was that purposeful?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it kind of goes back to the thought about, like, first of all, this is a very young kingdom, right? So like not everyone knows exactly what a king is meant to do. There's been like one great king, but like, like what happens afterwards and stuff like that. Not everyone knows how to run the kingdom. So they don't have like as much structure around them. Like they weren't raised in like in a royal environment. They were kind of elevated to it afterwards.
Yeah.
So like that's like one big part of it. And then secondly, like a good story is always just about internal struggle, right? Like these people are humans. Like you get in their heads. I personally like to think that most people are pretty good and they try to do good most of the time. So then with these characters, it's like, yeah, they do try to do good most of the time, but sometimes they mess up and there's grave consequences. And then how do they deal with with their mess ups and then the fact that they messed up. And like the other thing is, I think, I love me a character driven story. And I think like one of the key facets of a character driven story, like one of the most important things is just relationships and like how people interact with each other and who is important to them and why and what will they do for that person, versus because it's such an essential part of the human experience, I think.
Yeah, and I too love me a character driven story. That's what I write about. I love reading the books that are really compelling to me are character driven. Yours certainly was. And I'm going to keep going a bit more about the characters, but I also want to get into the world. I think one of the things I absolutely couldn't get enough of your books is that you write these characters, they're all flawed, they're all messy, they all have a lot of baggage. And some of them will have arcs that are somewhat redemptive, some of them will have arcs that are close to redemptive, and some just won't.
Oh, I think you froze. Or is that me? Not sure if folk in the chat, can you guys hear me? Is PL frozen just for me or for you guys as well? So it's his fault, not mine. That's fine. Well, it's all good. Oh, are you back?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I apologize. Something we had a glitch there, I guess. So
worries.
Yeah, apologies. It's probably my internet. So where I was, yeah, it just froze in. Yep.
You were just telling me how good I am.
Yeah, I was just singing your praises. Sorry, we're back. Thanks, James. So you have these characters, these very other flawed, messy characters, and one of them is a general, and he has some definite issues with, life is not going well, and he has to delve deep into the heart of his own prejudices in particular to try and essentially, salvage his family or what's left of it, right? You have a disgraced minister who is, covetous of power and wants to be the power behind the throne, and he is willing to do seemingly almost anything, including betray those in power to get what he wants, and he's willing to undergo a mission that's really going to change him. And you have a character who wants to be a religious leader and wants to bring about major change, but maybe doesn't have the moral high ground to do that. You have all these beautifully flawed, messy characters. And there's an argument, and I loved all your characters. I thought they were amazing. They were so well thought out and well compiled. So is it tough to write a book where I know some readers, they need to have that pure good shining characters, and there were a couple, not all of them made out so well, but there were a couple of more secondary characters. Is it tough to write a book where the characters are all essentially pretty messed up? Because I loved it.
I mean, listen, PL, that's a question I should ask you, because you are well known for your messy, very flawed characters, and I say that with a great compliment. But I mean, look, my favorite author is Joe Abercrombie, right? So I love me a great character. Give me as great as possible. I think, when you look back on your work and stuff, and you're always thinking of like ways you could improve it. I do think like I could have maybe given a few of them more redemptive features early. I don't know. Maybe there was like some stuff I could have done to try and make them a bit more likable, but ultimately I just tried to capture them as humanly as possible, I think. And that's always it's always kind of a shaky ground as an author, because people do like reading a likable character. I think if you make your character too quote unquote realistic, then they can get very controversial quickly. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think, like I said before, I think most people tend to be good, but at the same time, most people tend to be flawed as well. So if we can get into their heads and understand, why they make the mistakes that they make, and then how they try to overcome and come back from those, it makes for good storytelling.
And I think it makes for exceptional storytelling. And you talk about being able to come back for that. Do you feel that, and obviously as the author, I would assume so, was there times you thought about potentially giving some of your characters a different arc in terms of specifically the redemptive aspect, like some people not getting that redemption or others getting it, but you made that decision perhaps part way or near the end, or maybe you wrote it and you went back and you rewrote it? How did that work for you?
That's a good question. I'm trying to remember how the process went about with stuff like that. So I think, like I mentioned before, I kind of just stayed with the character and let them act as they would. It's kind of like almost a flow state, I guess. I'm just, because one of the things in my writing I tried to do was really embody the character's voice in the prose. It's not something I was like, I would say I'm amazing at prose or anything, but I try my best to like write each chapter with a sense of whichever character is speaking. Like you have a sense that this is this character and this voice. And I find as an author to do that, it's very challenging. Like you really have to like put yourself into their headspace. And like once you start getting used to that, once you start doing that, you start understanding the character a bit better. And then once they're in a different situation, you kind of have an intuitive feeling for how they're going to go about doing it. And then you end up where you as an author kind of are like almost God here. Like, okay,
Yeah.
I can like screw you over right now, or I can forgive you. But at the same time, in my mind, I'm thinking back to this entire journey I've been on with you and how you've been acting that entire time. I'm like, do you deserve redemption? Or do you not?
Who's the power?
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, like you just like you kind of get to know the character over a period of writing a book. And then when it comes to that moment, like does this guy get redemption or not? Like, it kind of depends how they behaved, doesn't it? Like, were you a good boy or a bad boy? Like, did you get coal in your stocking, or are you gonna get a nice gift under your Christmas tree? So
Oh, that is awesome. And I have to say, I don't want to. I'm not quite ready yet to depart from characters because you know how obsessed I am about your characters. But you mentioned prose, my friend. I will. I am. My friends tease me about me being a prose snob. That for me to be completely immersed in a book, it needs to have a certain type of writing, just a certain level of craft and devotion to the actual words on the page. Janie Wirtz is my favorite author. You talk about Joe Abercrombie. I love Joe Abercrombie too, but Janie Wirtz is my favorite author, and it's her prose. I think that's the one thing that puts her above the rest for me. So I love books that have great prose, and you write fabulous. And I'm going to embarrass you now because I like to do that. But I'm just going to. I mean, it's simple. I'm simply going to read just quickly the after. Well, I'm going to read the prologue of Riven Earth. Just the first two paragraphs. One's very short. Everything ended in fire. Embers danced in a rush of scorched wind. Flames roared and swept through the canopy, devouring the flesh of trees. Wood crackled, popped, burst, and snapped. Leaves crumbled to dust. The earth shook, and the red sky bled black smoke, plumes billowing over a charred maze of twisted branches and splintered trunks. The forest screamed as it burned. Oaks groaned as their skins ripped and their innards cooked. Willows wept. Aspens trembled. Beasts died, and birds dropped. I think that's pretty powerful writing, my friend. I think you're an outstanding writer. I think your prose is fabulous. One thing I loved about, and this is where I can't read the characters quite yet, but when we talk about the world building, in that it was very organic. You very much, I love writers that are able to incorporate information about the world, and gloriously lay out the world building and the sights and sounds and smells interspersed between dialogue. It was very smooth. It was very organic, right? It was amazing. So, I have to compliment you, my friend. I mean, your prose is pretty darn good. So, and because I don't put books up there on my list unless they have that. So, yours definitely did.
I
So,
mean, that honestly means a lot because I've told you before, like I adore the way that your books are written. And I think like it's interesting because we do have very different styles, I think. You really embody that archaic style. Like
yeah, yeah,
you're able to write in a way which feels like just classic fantasy. Like this is like you're there at that person. This is the way that person speaks, and like they speak with this kingly authority because they are
yeah,
like whatever
yeah,
a king. And I adore it. And that's the kind of writing style which like I often wish I could just do it. I just don't have the guts. Like I don't feel confident in my ability to maintain that through the course of an entire book because I feel like the most important thing is that you need to be consistent in whatever style you pick, right? Um, so like I mentioned before, I'm a huge Abercrombie fan, and I think like one of the most underrated things about Abercrombie is his prose,
yes,
because he's got such a sense of rhythm to his words,
yes,
and like people adore Abercrombie's audiobooks because they have such a good narrator, but also because they're just written in a way that's read really well. So like that's kind of the way that I try to embody prose in my work is I try to give the words a sense of rhythm. I try to give them a good flow from one paragraph to another. And then when it comes to like descriptions and stuff, I love flowery language, so I could get a bit
yeah,
flowery when it comes to like descriptions. I think, and then when it comes to dialogue, I try to be a little bit more punchy, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah.
I kind of just get the point across quickly. So, yeah,
And it worked really well. It worked really, really well for me. It was awesome. I just chipped on mentioned what we were talking earlier about our which our bad words because of the flawed, great characters. Um, like I said, so well written, really transported me. And so lastly about the characters before I get to the world building. So the one thing I adore about characterization is when a writer is not afraid, and I'm going to backtrack quickly here. I think you totally have all the chops to write any kind of style you want. I think it's more a question of, I write my main character because, as you said, that is his position in society, that's his
yeah,
education, that's his upbringing. But I think you've read my short story where it's a character
very
not
different.
at that strand of society, and he speaks very differently. So I think it's more about you do write about well, several kings and rulers, right, and
Mhm.
leaders, and I think it's more about their upbringing, how they were raised, how they, you know, I think you can write. You should have talent to write anybody at any strata of society.
Yeah.
But yeah, I write about this king who is supposedly, you know
But PL, like
um
that is a credit to your skill as an author, right? It's like if you haven't written a book, you might not appreciate just how challenging that can be to like really embody the voice of a character and um, the fact that you pay so much attention to it and it comes across in the quality of the prose in your work is I think really one of the reasons why your work is so elevated. Like I think a lot of authors these days don't give prose the attention that it deserves. So that like yeah, I'm a big fan.
no, I'm honored. But this is about your work, my friend. So we got to stick to that. So in terms of the world building, again, just this. I think one of the things that grabbed me right off the bat is what you mentioned from the onset, is that you chose to make this world, um, you know, a world very much in trouble right away, right? You have the humans living in the strip of land and polar opposites of, too hot or too cold, these climatic extremes. And you have as well, and this is, and I even, there's so much to talk about your books. There's so many amazing aspects. You have other creatures that are inhabiting this world, and they're sentient, and I don't even want to. I can't even spoil. I cannot spoil that element because it's just so. I think people just need to read it because it was one of my favorite parts of the book, and let's just say you have other creatures who live in other tribes, and they have a role to play in the book. And then, of course, there's outside malevolent threats that maybe not everyone's aware of. There's so with the world building, you write so descriptive about the places, and you paint such a vivid picture about from the forest to the pastures, like everything. But the one thing about your world building is that this is a bleak world, right? This is a world that they got some issues, right? And what made you decide to compose a world that looked like this?
Yeah, I mean that's you're still you're giving me almost too much credit by implying I decided anything. It just kind of happened the way it did. Okay, so with world building, I think I really wanted to. I kind of knew that environmentalism is going to be the major theme of this book. Like going into it, it's something I'm very passionate about. It's something which I think it's a theme that has a lot of potential to be explored, but we haven't really seen as much of it explored as it is. So that's why the world just kind of came to me as this very lush and vivid forest, and then you can kind of see the way that's dying, and there's a good contrast there, right? So that's why the cover, it's all the animals in this world are kind of they're all leafy and they're plant Pokemon, like even these dinosaurs, they have trees growing out of their backs and stuff. So that's more or less where the animals were inspired by plant Pokemon. But I wanted to write a world which, for me, like I said, I'm an Abercrombie fan, and Abercrombie's I don't care about the world. So in a lot of ways, I'm the same way. So it's actually almost shocking to me the amount of people that comment on the world building in my books. I'm like, really? That was it was almost secondary. What about the character arcs and stuff? But I wanted to write a world that was very deeply integrated into the thematic elements of the book and also the plot, right? So I wanted it all to be very tied in together, and at the same time, it's the kind of thing where the characters live there. Yes, I agree, it's a very bleak world, but to them, it's kind of this is just the way it is. This is normal. They don't even realize that things are wrong, right? The world has stopped turning, guys. But they're what do you mean the world has stopped turning? The sun's always just sat there, right? So how do you describe that, right? How do you explain that kind of world to someone without being oh, the sun doesn't move, because that just that's kind of lame. But actually, it's just continuously putting in descriptions of sunsets, and at some point it's made more clear that oh, actually the sun isn't moving, right? But yeah, just trying to explore the world very organically and get it across organically is probably, as you know, one of the great challenges of writing a fantasy book. But for me, it was integrating it deeply into the plot and themes, and you're talking about this other tribe of creatures, and for me, it's one of the big major things with them is the direct contrast with the humans, because there is a magic system in this world, and that magic system is sort of tied into this idea of three, so the earth, the sun, and the moon. And the humans are not part of anything to do with the moon, but these creatures are. And what they have is the power of foresight, which humans tend to not have very good foresight, in my humble opinion. So that was kind of tied into that environmental theme, where the humans don't really know what they're doing, but these guys do. and yeah, so it just allows you to kind of expand the world that way. But
well, I thought it was so well done. Just quickly from James, dinosaurs. That's it. He loves little dinosaurs. That's it. He's buying a copy. So I can't even talk about without spoiling anything. You just have to read.
I love dinosaurs.
I love the dinosaurs. It's amazing, and you don't often see them in fantasy. I find in traditional epic fantasy, you don't see dinosaurs. So that I thought that was an element that that was just awesome. But as well thematically, okay. So I talked about some things that I need to make me love a book, and yours had all the elements that you need. But thematically, wow, did you knock it out of the park? I know we could. I mean, it would take 3 or 4 hours to talk about all the compelling themes that were in your book. But amongst them, mental health was something that you really addressed in your book. That was huge, and I thought it was so well handled and sensibly handled, and you addressed things like rebellion, right? And what starts how does the government go? How does the government find itself undermined? What are the reasons? What keeps a realm together? And the very, in some ways mundane but extremely important elements of running a realm in a media context. All the things that goes into that, all the minutia, and all the things you need to do to take care of not just the people, but the actual system of governance, right? You really get into it. It's so well done the way you do that. You also delve into things like religion, and that's huge. And you talk about how Isaiah, his words are appropriated, misinterpreted, twisted, used for people's own ends, and people's historical knowledge is somewhat skewed in terms of what's happened. You also have because of what's happened with the Dryads. You have a perception of them. You have all these very twisted and not necessarily accurate perceptions. The different varying races of the humans of each other, and it leads to a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of conflict. And they were all so well done. What was the themes? What was the one theme other than perhaps environmentalism of all those that I spoke about? Can you pick a one that you kind of really want to bring across in your work?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think like you did a great job capturing a lot of the ones that I was thinking of. I really tried to tie the themes closely with the character arcs as well. Like each character has a journey to go on, and those journeys tell us something about the human experience. I think generally, I would say the mental health one was really big. I wanted to like make sure I try to do justice to that. And I mean that like it's hard to know if you ever truly can, but it's something which I felt it's important to write about stuff like that, and to really get in the headspace of characters like that. Just if nothing else, to better understand that for yourself as an author, I think is really good. And then I think just general theme of I guess kind of tied into the environmentalism of just hope. Like we can do better, right? Like if we understand what's happening and we put in the efforts, then like we can step up to the plate, and people have the ability to do that, and like people will do what they always can to save their loved ones. And I think there's some message in there someone can interpret for me.
Well, again, thematically, some excellent thematic work there as well. And James just quickly comments about dinosaurs that we need more fantasy with them. It's crazy that we don't. Yeah, it's just, and that just added to the uniqueness of your book for me. That it struck me right away. Like, we just don't often see dinosaurs, and that was awesome. Now, quickly before we go back in terms of talking about other elements of your book, there's a question here from James. He says, Zammar, what are some of your favorite fantasy novels or series that go unmentioned or are underrated?
Ooh, that was a good question. So, I mean, there is PL's work, but I've already talked a lot about that. So I recently read The Bone Chips. Have you read The Bone Chips?
No, I haven't actually. R.J. Barker? No, I haven't read it.
Oh, yeah, you're going to love The Bone Chips. It's so good. Okay. And like one of the reasons I read them is because a lot of people were saying, "Oh, Zammar, your books are very similar to The Bone Chips," I was like, really? Because they
Wow.
say like there's a lot of made up creatures and a lot of like fantasy terms, but yeah, I think I would if I could just recommend one series just because I read it recently and I loved it, I would say check out the Bone Chips. It's very epic and grand and cool and very imaginative, but at the same time it's very intimate. You have very close character narratives. It's about pirates and it's just really cool. It's so well written. Like I was reading it and it's one of those series that just you read it and it makes you feel inadequate as well. And then, yeah.
Oh, I hear you, and it's been on my TBR for a long time. I will have to, based on your rec, I will have to bump that up. It seems that James has read it, and he says Bone Ships was amazing. Some of the best character work he's seen done. So that's a high praise from both of you. So I'm definitely gonna have to see if I can bump that up my TBR. You know the TBR struggle, it's real. Just can't get to all the books that you want. I still have to get to your novella. That's high on my priority list as well. There's so many books that but we can, right? But I will definitely try and bump Bone Chips up based on your rec, Zammar, and also James. Thank you very much for.
It's got my endorsement for whatever that's worth.
Oh, it's worth a lot to me. So definitely, especially after reading it and love your work. So one thing I want to talk about thematically is that. So I mentioned some of the other themes that I felt you explored so well. One thing that and I guess I'm not saying it's a trigger warning. Like I love dark fantasy. Your book is dark, man. Some dark stuff happens in there, right? Some really dark stuff. And I think like some of my favorite dark fantasy authors, especially on the indie side, the Michael R. Fletchers, the J. Hanfords, I mentioned her. It's really like when you have to deal with things that especially include, like we talked about mental health, things that affect children, sexual violence, right? Do you like me? I can tell you for me, I just write it and I go back later and read how I write it. But at first I just write the scene and and then I look back to see, is this sensibly done? Is this, and whether it's engaging a sensitivity reader, etc. Like it's always afterwards that you go back, but initially it's unvarnished. It's just like, this is what happened. This is how it is. That's how I write scenes that are more troubling, right? How do you deal with and cope with scenes like that?
Yeah, just I guess go to a dark place. I think it's very similar to the way you described it. Like just kind of unvarnished, put it out on paper, get a chance to take a breather, come back later and be like, okay, did I go too far? Should I tone this down a bit? And it's very, very hard to answer those questions. I think, like especially before you get beta readers and you get like editor feedback, and that's where that stuff really comes in handy because like they can kind of provide some more perspective of like, okay, maybe this is a bit too much and maybe this is a bit too far. But I would say is like, even though like I think you're right that my books do go to pretty dark places, especially book 2. I think generally speaking, I'm a broadly optimistic person, so I hope that there's like a sense of hope to the books as well, and a sense of like light at the end of the tunnel. It's not like full on cynical like Abercrombie, for example. But yeah, I don't know. I love grimdark stuff, so it just kind of seeps into the work.
No, I have to agree. It's definitely not nihilistic. Like I've read, one series I'm itching to get back to that is extremely dark. I read the first book is Arscott Backer. His Prince and Nothing. Like that first book, like man, it's dark. It's beautiful. I'm addicted to it. I know it's a series that I just know is even my all-time favorite, but the friggin' thing is dark, man. That's pretty twisted. It doesn't be a lot of hope in that series, and everybody that tells me who's read it tells me it doesn't necessarily get better. No, your series definitely has a real sense of hope, and I of course I can't spoil anything here, but I want to quickly broach the topic as we're winding down about bittersweet endings and what they mean to you. So again, without spoiling, that's definitely how I felt. after reading your book, it was a fantastic example of an extremely well thought out bittersweet ending, and that's difficult to do, right? And that's one of the reasons I give you so much kudos as a writer, because that's hard to do. You often see series that, I'd say about 75% of the fantasy series that I've read, even some of the best ones. And of course, it's up to the author how they choose to start and their book. I think a lot of us, find that, if we can look for I guess, of an opinionated, subjective opinion, a weak point of the series, it may or may not be the ending, depending on what I can. But your ending was awesome, man. What to you as an author and reader what do you think makes a good bittersweet ending?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. So I love bittersweet endings. I think like they just hit different, and they have the potential to hit you in the feels in a way that like a fully happy ending doesn't. Because I think that if you could capture the sense of loss and how that's like changed the characters and it changed the world, then you can like truly encapsulate what the story meant. If that makes sense. Like if everything is like, oh, hunky dory and then everyone lived happily ever after, it's kind of like, what was the point of everything? But like if it's almost like a Pyrrhic victory, right? It's like
Yeah,
you won, but there was a loss, and like we
yeah,
remember that loss. And we think about like the great wars of history, like World War II. It's not a glorious victory. It's very
yeah.
bittersweet and sad, right? But like that's what makes it more powerful for it. So for me, it's about um, capturing the costs of how we ended up here and how we resolved everything, capturing the cost and what it means and how our characters changed. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everything was bad, right? It's not like just it was the end of the world and everything sucks or whatever. Like that's not necessarily the case. I think it's just generally speaking, anytime there's been great change in the world, it's usually come at some expense, and I think being able to capture that just makes the story more powerful.
Oh, well said. Well said. I too. I love bittersweet endings. I love even endings that are not happy. If I was going to choose between happy, bittersweet, and horrible or sad, I'd choose bittersweet. However, I think I'd choose sad and horrible before happy, only because, and not because of again, it's not the nihilism. It's just that, again, those are the ones that hit you in the feels as the reader, for you as the author conveying that to the reader. So I sort of know my series is sort of not gonna have a happy ending. I won't say what kind of ending it's gonna have, but it's definitely not gonna have a happy ending. So you know, I do admire the way you ended your series. I want to quickly delve into, because we didn't really, what your novella is about, because it's part of your universe, but we didn't get a chance to talk about what your novella is about.
Yeah. So essentially, I wrote this more recently. So after I published the two main books, this novella, it's a prequel. So it's set before Riven Earth, but I think that this book just hits much better if you read it after Riven Earth and after maybe even after Sundered Moon. I think ideally after both of the first two books, because what I didn't do in this story was like we follow the same characters earlier in their life before everything goes crazy, and it's almost like cozy grimdark. That's how I've been describing it. Like it's a sojourn in the Sunset Forest. Like we're just chilling with these characters, spending a little bit more time with them, exploring parts of this world which we didn't see before. But what I really wanted to capture in this was just to just add a bit more color to these characters and this world. And it was a way for me to essentially mostly just thank the people who've read the main series, and like several people have read it, and I was like so honored by it. So that's why this is like a free whatever mailing listing. I don't even do mailing lists, but I just said if you go to my website, sign up for the mailing list, you'll get this for free. And it's just my way of thanking people for reading my books, which just means the world to me. And a few people reached out and they wanted more from this world, more from these characters. And I was like, like this is still a good story. It was a way for me to say goodbye to the characters as well, and say goodbye to this world, and give me a little bit of closure so I can move on. And I just wanted to capture this sense of like like before the chaos of the main duology, what things were like, right? And we see how some of the characters from that were gone from this book, from the main books, but they still affected our characters.
Yeah.
Because they were like close relationships to them in some way. We see what those relationships were like. We can add a bit more color to everything there. So yeah, really happy with this one.
Well, that's amazing. Such a wonderful human being you are, Zammar. To want to say thank you for the people that read your series and loved it, and for support. That's a really, really, really sweet thing to do. And I can't wait to read it. And once but I'm almost dreading it, because then once I read it, then I will have read what you have currently published. So that leads me to, again, as we wind down to my next line of questioning, in that, what, if you can know and if you can share with us, you may not be able to, but what kind of projects you have to go? What's next for Zammar? You write this duology, you write the novella, people love it, you're getting all kinds of praise. What's next?
Yeah. So like I don't know. So I wrote these books, right? And now I look back on them, and sometimes I think like, wow, there's a lot of things I could have done differently. I feel like the author who wrote Ribbon Earth is not the author I am today in many ways, right? Like you probably understand this feeling. But after writing the duology, I was burned out for some time, because I just hadn't put that much effort into something for quite a while, and it's not like my primary job. Like obviously I still have work and stuff, so it was like hard to find the time to do it, but it felt like I was a bit burned out, so I took a bit of a break, and then I wrote the novella, which turned out pretty well. And now I finally feel like for me, I don't want to write anything until I feel that itch, like I've got a story and it's like coming to me and I need to like sit down and write it. And so that's what I started feeling over the past few months. So I'm writing again, which is great. So I'm like around 40,000 words into my newest. Yeah, and it's going really well. I'm really, really happy with it. And this feels like a story. So I love framing narratives. And like, I mean, your story is not exactly framing narrative, but it's first person. It kind of has a framing narrative vibe to it. And like, that's one of the reasons why it appeals to me. But I just wanted to write a framing narrative. And so that's what I've wanted to do. And then now, like, I finally it's almost like I met a character and I'm sitting down, and every time I write, it's like this character is just telling me their story. And it feels like it's coming out really naturally. And so really, really happy with the progress being made there. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations. I'm so happy for you. I'm happy for us, because we get to read more about more from Zammar. I've already kind of, preemptively, I have, my wife was kind enough to allow me to get my second bookshelf that I've been craving for a while. So thanks, honey. And definitely, I anticipate there will be a shelf reserved for Zammar AHMER once you got enough books out. That's going to be your shelf in my bookshelf. So but yeah, I'm anxious and excited for you to see what you write next. Are there any tidbits you can give us potentially about what it's about? I don't know. Again, I'm not expecting no reveal, but just anything you can tell us about it. The WIP.
I'm very excited to talk about it because, like I said, I'm kind of living in this right now. So I guess if I give a one-line pitch for this, it would be Robin Hobb meets Rogue One. So like I'm a huge Robin Hobb fan.
Yeah.
And it's not exactly so. This story is set in something like 1914-ish world, but it's fantasy as well. So we have it's almost like a flintlock fantasy.
Ooh, so like alternative history kind of thing, alternative historical fantasy, like
alternative world.
Alternative world. Okay.
Yeah. But
okay, well this sounds awesome. I can't. I'm getting really stoked. I can't wait to read that. So, but yeah, I'm wishing you all the best of luck with your writing. You're a phenomenal writer. I'm gonna plan to read everything you write. I'm very excited to see what you're doing next and how you continue to grow as a writer, and to see your popularity ascend, which I have no doubt it will. Quickly put up there from the awesome Chipo. Yeah, fantastic discussion. Yeah, dinosaurs. Yeah, Dinosaurs, man, you got to read it, Chibbo. It is awesome. I read those dinosaurs. Quickly, we could chat for hours. But yeah, I want to be respectful of your time. I know it's a Sunday, and potentially work in the morning, so I want to be respectful of that. And thank you so much for being so generous with your time. So, Zammar, as we're signing off, can you tell us for the audience where to find you on social media, where to buy your books, and things such as that?
Yeah, I mean, PL, thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure. I want to we should do this some other time and have a longer chat about your books. Maybe I'll invite you to my channel.
I'd be extremely honored.
To my little channel, which is on YouTube. I have a pretty small channel which I don't make enough videos on, called ZOMG Fantasy. And then you can find my books on Amazon. They're all there. And my website, zammarhammer.com. And then I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm around.
Yeah, and again, I cannot wait to read more from you, Zammar. Thank you so much for the privilege of being able to interview you. I'd be honored, of course, coming on your channel at some point. Yeah, so for me, quickly, peelstore.com is the books. 4 books out now. 5 books out now. I can see, even I'm forgetting. The 5th book, A Pack of Wolves, just came out recently. So 5 books out in the Drowned Kingdom saga. The 6th book, A Black Dragon on Red, expected for the spring of 2020.
Is that the title?
6, yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's a nice title. I like it.
Thank you. Yeah, A Black Dragon on Red. It's in the back of A Pack of Wolves, so the secret's out, right? Because I put the title of the next book in all the books.
Yeah.
I also have a short story in the Shapers of World anthology. Thank you so much. It is in the Drowned Kingdom universe, however, it's set centuries before the events in the main series, and it's very different from the main series, though, in terms of the characters and the voice. So if you're interested, there's some amazing authors in that anthology. So check it out. Even if you're not interested in mine, get that anthology, folks, because it is amazing. But hopefully, if you read Forrest Stark, you like it. I think it's kind of cool. Again, YouTube here, Drowned Kingdom Saga, my channel, where I do 6 elemental interviews, and I get the privilege of getting to sit down with people like Zammar, great people, authors, bloggers, people from the community, like Chibbo, who will be interviewing later. You can also find me beside my esteemed partner, Taylor, from Amazing Pages, another wonderful book. Check out Taylor's channel, where we do another interview series on page chewing, under the auspices of Steve Talks Books, page chewing. Big website, and check that out, where there's all kinds of amazing stuff going on there. It's like a mini Reddit, gaming and all sorts of stuff. So check out Steve's page chewing site. You can find my reviews predominantly on Before We Go blog. Shout out to the wonderful Beth, our fearless leader, and all the Before We Go blog crew. I'm the assistant editor there, and you can see my reviews on Goodreads. I typically put up my reviews on Goodreads. So once again, to the awesome Zammar Amir, thank you so much for coming. Congratulations on the success. I know it's only going to continue. And hopefully, and I'd love to have, if you do me an honor, come back to the channel at some point too, especially after you've released your work in progress. That would be amazing. We can talk about that. And and thank you to everyone who came by in the chat. Chibapo, James, Shane, you're what make this type of long form content awesome. And so thank you. And thank you, of course, to everyone who's going to watch the replay on this. So once again, Zammar and I are signing off, and we'll see you next time.